Welcome to our weekly discussion, Moral Side of the News. I'm Shawn Kaelin with the WHAS Crusade for Children. Joining us today, as always, a distinguished panel. Father Tony Smith, the Archdiocese of Louisville. Reverend Sally McClain, Christian Church Disciples of Christ. Reverend Clay Calloway, West Louisville Ministers Coalition. Rabbi Stan Miles, Louisville Mountain School. And our special guest today, Deacon Greg Gitschier, former Secret Service agent and current deacon at St. Patrick Catholic Church. Last Saturday, July 13th, a gunman on a nearby rooftop attempted to assassinate former President Donald Trump at a campaign rally. This is how ABC News covered the event from that night.
This is the moment gunfire erupted just minutes into Donald Trump's speech in Pennsylvania.
Take a look at what happened.
At 6:15 p.m. Saturday, several pops could be heard. The former president grabbing his ear, ducking behind the podium. Secret Service members quickly rushing onto the stage to shield him. The crowd just feet away screams, running for cover as agents lift the former president to his feet.
I got you, sir. I got you, sir.
Let me get my shoes, sir.
Hold on, your head is bloody.
So we gotta move to the car.
You can see the blood running across Trump's face. As Secret Service agents surround him, the former president reaching through his security detail, pumping his fists in the air. Trump raising one more fist to the crowd as he's put in an armored SUV, rushing him to a local medical center. Trump revealing he was shot with a bullet that pierced the upper part of my right ear.
He started speaking, and then we heard pound, pound, pop, pop, pop.
Tell me what you saw and what you heard. You said that you heard the popping sounds and you got down?
Sounds. At first you think like maybe firecrackers, but it continued, and then somebody yelled, "Get down." We got down, and we huddled, and we started praying.
One man seen gripping his chest, another carried away by two police officers. Authorities say one attendee was killed, two others critically wounded. Law enforcement sources telling ABC News as many as 8 rounds were fired from an AR-style rifle while perched on an adjacent rooftop outside the perimeter of the event, opening fire less than 200 yards away from Trump's location. The Secret Service saying they neutralized the suspected gunman, who the FBI later identified as 20-year-old Thomas Matthew Crooks. You can see those snipers reacting to the sound of gunshots, shifting their position before responding fire. A law enforcement official briefed on the investigation tells us this image is believed to show that suspected gunman on the roof. President Biden briefed on the situation, addressing the nation.
There's no place in America for this kind of violence. It's sick. It's sick. It's one of the reasons why we have to unite this country. We cannot allow for this to be happening. We cannot be like this. We cannot condone this.
Shortly after his address, the White House confirming that President Biden and Trump spoke by phone, but the administration did not provide details of their conversation. Trump posting on Truth Social thanking the Secret Service, saying, "I want to extend my condolences to the family of the person at the rally who was killed, and also to the family of another person that was badly injured. It is incredible that such an act can take place in our country." And overnight, the former president landing back in Newark hours after an assassination attempt that could have taken his life.
Our prayers go out to the victims of this tragedy, especially the family members of volunteer fire chief Corey Coppertor, who was attending the rally with his family and sustained fatal wounds. Many questions surround the security in place at the event that night, and we'll get to some of that in just a minute with our special guest. But I wanted to open it up first to our panel for your thoughts.
Well, we're taught when you see something, say something, and apparently that's what happened, so I'm probably going ahead and asking a question that I'm not supposed to ask. But my main thought was, I don't understand why we're surprised with as many guns that we have in the United States. What was the surprise that one would sneak through?
Yeah, and again, I agree with you, Sally. This is a gun-saturated society. I mean, saturated. And if you have guns everywhere, you can have a shooting that could happen anywhere, at any time. So that's the country that we live in. I want to speak to the statement that Donald Trump made at the end, talking about it's incredible that something like this can happen in this country. No, it's not incredible. Mm-hmm. It's almost predictable. sad, of course, that it happened, but given the gun saturation that exists in this country, it's no real shock that something like this can happen. The real shock is that it doesn't happen more frequent than it does. So I'm glad he was not seriously injured, and sad for those that were gravely wounded and killed. But that's the state of affairs in this country with respect to guns.
Well, to your point, I respond to that in saying, yes, there are many, I don't know how many deaths occurred on that day that the president was attempted assassination on the president. But this is a different scenario. This is not like a street corner. This is not in the where the drive-by shootings or whatever. This is a candidate for the United States presidency with all kinds, and Greg may get into this later on, but all kinds of security around him type thing. So that makes it a little bit more incredible that with all of that in place, that something like, but it has happened before. President Kennedy and all the different presidents in our history.
Reagan?
Well, it was attempted ones, but even the ones who were killed, you look at past history, you've had a number of presidents who've been killed. And so it is, in that sense, where there's a way, there's a will, there's a way, whether it's a gun or whether it's through munitions of some sort or explosives. I mean, it's there. But again, I think everyone concurs that this is not, I would concur with President Biden's comment, this is not what we are about in this country. If we are going to settle our issues this way, then we've already lost democracy and everything else. This is not the way we do it.
I was astounded by the setup for the rally. It just seemed like a very small number of people in a very isolated, small space, and it. I can see how the guy got through with the gun, because it was wide. It looked to me like a wide open space, and one of my earliest memories when I was a kid was when President Kennedy was assassinated, and the openness just reminded me of that horrible time in Dallas in 1963. And that's before we were, as God forbid, attuned to the reality of political assassinations. It's not unusual today. We've gotten used to it, and therein lies the real tragedy.
And Stan, you bring up some excellent points, and we're going to get to those right now about the openness and the security of the situation. And it's a dynamic news week we're in right now, because it seems like hourly. We taped this on Thursday afternoon. It seems like hourly almost since the event happened, news has been coming out. Just yesterday, Wednesday of this week, the FBI released a timeline of events, and at 5:10, they identified a person of interest 62 minutes before the shooting took place. At 5:30, they spotted this person with a rangefinder. At 5:52, they spotted him on the roof. Secret Service spotted him on the roof 20 minutes before the shooting. These are FBI numbers. And at 6:02, Trump takes the stage 10 minutes before the shooting, and at 6:12 is when Crooks fires the first shots. So I bring Deacon Greg in at this point, and I mean, the first question that comes to mind for me, and certainly anyone else can chime in, but were there mistakes made in the protection detail of the former president on Saturday?
That's an easy question. Absolutely, yes. And I love the agency. I served for over 2 decades, but mistakes were definitely made, and they should not, in my opinion, I'm an overtired guy, but in my opinion, they should not be pointing fingers at local law enforcement. It is ultimately our responsibility to protect the President of the United States, or whichever protectee we are assigned. It could be the vice president, it could be a former president, it could be a foreign head of state that comes to America. They all get a high level of protection. Obviously, the president gets many more people and assets than a former president would get, or a vice president or a head of state. So that number fluctuates. It's my opinion that the number should be equivalent to the threat level against that particular person. Just because someone's a former president, they drop way down here with assets and compared to the current president. But which one has the higher threat level? Which one's out the most in many cities? You know, can can you say that he gets less, the former president gets less than the first lady gets? You know, who has the highest threat level? So I think that's the way it should be done. But unfortunately, it seems like it's done by category of what they are.
Let me ask a question real quick. Because he's a candidate, he's a former president and also a candidate. Does that raise the value of the protection that he gets because he's a candidate in addition to being a former president?
Correct. The former president is the key there. Every year, you know, I was assigned for 4 years with President Reagan and his family from 85 to 89, his last 4 years. So that's all I did. But when you're back in the investigations, because we still are federal agents, we still investigate counterfeit money, fraud, and threats against the president. And but while you're doing that, you could every 3 weeks during a campaign year, your name goes in the hat saying, this agent in Louisville, Kentucky is available for the next 3 weeks for any assignment in the protection world. It could be any of those people we've talked about. So you don't know if you're going overseas or if you're going around the country. So those people are either very young agents that haven't done protection yet or older agents that have already done their full-time protection, and now they're called post-standers. Somewhere on this list from Saturday night, there are written documents and text that tell you exactly where everybody was assigned, from what time to what time, and I hope they don't disappear. I'm not saying they will. Sometimes things seem to disappear with the government. I'll just leave it at that. So there's validation of everything that was set up for that operation, but absolutely mistakes were made in the advance work. I think the agents that are on the shift, they did the things that we were taught hundreds of times, and we're videotaped doing it to get better at it, is cover, as you saw them all cover, and evacuate, get them off. As they were evacuating them, the wall separated, the armored limousine, back then it was a Suburban, and they were trying to put him in there. He's a big man. He's 6'3.5", and he's a solid guy, and he was kind of resisting them, pushing him off the stage, and he's pumping his fist and everything, right? So I'm sure the adrenaline is flowing. A bullet just whizzed by his head. When I was a police officer here, I had a bullet whiz by my head, and I tell you, I heard it. I heard the whizzing, and it didn't touch me, but it went over my head. It's an eerie feeling. I'm sure his adrenaline was pumping, you know, but they were trying to get him into that armored van as quick as possible.
But what about securing the perimeter? I mean, who's in charge of securing the perimeter?
Absolutely us. Now, did we assign that particular building local law enforcement? Yes, from what I've been told. Now, I'm on a text group with about 5 or 6 agents that have retired like myself. Between us, we have maybe 150 years of service in the Secret Service. So we sort of know what we're talking about. And there's 3 layers of protection. There's the outer layer, which is everything outside the venue. There's the middle layer, which you have to walk through a metal detector to go into that middle layer, right? Which this guy obviously never had to do because he was outside the layer. Then you have the inner circle, which is the agents that are assigned to protect him. Right. You saw the shift agents cover him up. You saw the 2 guys in black SWAT uniforms jump up on stage with their automatic weapons. And they're not looking back to what's going on behind them. They're looking ahead because we never know, is this a single attempt or is this more than one shooter? Or are they trying to make us evacuate into a bigger kill zone, an easier kill zone? So we always have to worry about diversion, okay? So that's what those guys did. They're called the CAT team, C-A-T, Counter Assault Team. Very much like Special Forces, which you asked me about early. They train with Special Forces. They are very good. That's all they do for that assignment. So that's what they do. They jump up and they're ready for a second attack, okay?
But what I understand is that people were saying something. They did see this
outside
person.
The perimeter, yes.
Yeah, outside the perimeter.
I saw the phone video. So they were telling the police, hey, there's a guy up there. There's a guy up there, right? We all saw it. So that means that once the police got that, they should have contacted the Secret Service, and they might have, I wasn't there, and say, hey, we got a problem. We got this guy. So you gave this some times, and they're pretty close to the same times I've heard from pretty reliable sources. And so that means to me, and I've done the site agent, like there's one guy doing the site, or girl, and they have a counterpart from the closest field office of the Secret Service, which in my opinion would be Pittsburgh. So they had a counterpart team at the site, they had a counterpart team on the motorcades, they had a counterpart team with the snipers. So it's always 2 people, right? So that building was supposed to be covered. What I have been told, unofficially, Shawn, okay, is that they said, hey, you guys, police officers, and there were probably state police SWAT, because we always prefer the state police SWAT because they're full-time and they train very hard. So in every state we go, we would always prefer the state. If we can't do it, we prefer it to be state police SWAT team. So I think they were told to get up to do that roof, and apparently the decision was made not to go on the roof by them, but to go out of a window on the second floor. So basically they gave up the roof, okay? Now, this is what I'm hearing through text, so I'm not saying this is 100%, okay? It comes from very reliable sources. That's why nobody was on that roof, and that's the number one question. How could that be? I don't want to talk too long, but yeah.
No, that's why you're here.
Do we know what caused President Trump's injury?
Yes, it's been pretty much through all the technology that I've seen of the video, breaking down the video. He was shooting an AR-15 rifle, which is a civilian version of the M16 military rifle, and it was a .223 round, which is a very high velocity round, which is what our military used to fight enemy soldiers. And it was a 130-yard shot, and to be honest with you, that is a easy shot for anyone who's a hunter or anyone who got a Boy Scout merit badge with their .22. It's not a hard shot at all. Our counter snipers, which were on that roof, that's all they do. That they train and they travel, they train and travel. It's like being on a football scholarship. They have got to hit a bowling pin at 1,000 yards to stay on that team. A bowling pin at 10 football fields. That's how good they are. Most of them are, from my experience, have been Marine sharpshooters, very well trained. So those officers are very good at what they do, okay? But they were put behind former President Trump, and they were looking out that way. They thought the local law enforcement had that building secure. That's a mistake to think they had it secure. Somebody should have checked that they had it secure and asked why they weren't up there, right? So the other thing you got to remember is we are at Secret Service. We carry a digital encrypted radio. Every month, WACA, which is a military communication agency, they change our encryption every month. So we can't talk to the local police because we have encrypted radios. So we have a command post on site, and they should have had Secret Service radio here, Post Standards radio here, the counter snipers and CAT team radio here, local state police here, and maybe the Bullitt County Butler County Sheriff's Department here. That's a lot of radios going on. I think that's why there was a communication snafu, that all this was going on and they didn't get the word to the right people. I'm not making excuses. We made a mistake.
There's a lot of discussion this week. As I said, things are happening daily and hourly about the call for the Secret Service, head of the Secret Service, to resign or be fired, especially given comments about the steepness of the roof, even, for example, that we didn't have somebody up there, but it seems to be contradictory, even what I'm hearing you say, that there should have been someone on that roof.
No question. Yeah, no question. They said it was 7 or 8 degrees. 7 or 8 degrees is nothing. Most of all the houses in our neighborhoods are got to be like 30 or 40 degrees, right? I'm really sorry that somebody said that. I really am sorry. They shouldn't have said that we relied on the police to take care of it. That's, to my opinion, is a mistake. They should not have said that roof would have made that much of a difference. What I think that means to the counter snipers, the way they were set up, if he was behind the ridge of that roof, they couldn't get a clean shot at him. I also was told that there's a tree in there, so we need to look at the Google Earth to say if there is a tree between their shot and that roof. So they could only get him when his head comes over that ridge. What they had to be very careful about, remember, we're supposed to have police on that roof. The last thing they want to do, it's called blue on blue, a cop shooting another cop. So that's why they just couldn't fire, thinking maybe that's the bad guy or maybe it's one of the police. From the video on there with the guy that shot on the roof and he's in a supine position, laying down, it looked like he might have had camouflage pants on and maybe like a brownish. You know how the Army guys wear the brown-green T-shirts? I'm not saying it was. It looked like, so it might have been enough to have that guy hold to make sure he's not going to shoot another police officer, okay? And then when he did pop up, what I've been told, Shawn, and this is unofficial, is that one of the local police officers came up on the roof and engaged him, and then he fired at that policeman, which might have been the first shot you hear. He had to go back down the ladder or go back wherever he came from to avoid the suspect shooting him, and that probably rushed his shot, which is why, as the bullet should have hit him right here, because the President Trump's head was just barely turned, and then luckily he turned like this, and the bullet went to the top of his ear. That's what I've been told.
Well, that by any measure, you would call that amazing grace.
Oh, yes.
By any measure,
Absolutely.
by any account, by any metric you may use, it's only by the grace of God. He was not,
I agree.
So it's, I don't know if y'all remember the movie Pulp Fiction. Remember Pulp Fiction? and the John Travolta character and they had a similar incident in another encounter. But that incident gave them a moment of clarity that really changed their whole perspective on life. I don't know if it had that effect on Donald Trump or not. Some people say he looked different at the convention, that he had a different look about him. Might have been, I don't know. But by all accounts, that was just amazing grace that he was not.
Well, you could say it's amazing grace for the president, but the man who was killed and the others was not
but
such.
you know, I know, but grace, but it still, it could have did what he said, but it didn't.
Yeah, I haven't heard anything about the time frame from the initial shooting at the former president to when the shooter was actually killed. Do you know what the time frame was on that?
18 seconds, maybe. 18 seconds from the first shot to the counter snipers being to locate him and know he's the one that shot.
To secure that he's the person that they're after.
Yeah, they had to make sure that was the right one. I'm not making excuses. These guys,
no,
are
18
so good.
seconds.
Yeah,
sounds
and that might be
incredible
the long side of 18 seconds. That might have been 18 seconds before somebody said he was up there, and they're trying to find him. Every counter sniper is two-person team. One is the binoculars and then the other, and besides binoculars, he has a wind gauge, and they've already set their scopes to the temperature, the sea level, and the humidity, so they know that bullet's going to hit exactly where they want to hit. Yeah, well, that's what they do for a living. They're very, very good. So they had to react to that person and make sure it's not a police officer, and then when they realized it was the guy, and that's why I think I've been told he was shot in the head with a 5.56. Does that sound right? Father Tony, 5.56, he knows maybe, but it's a
That's why we call him Tony Smith and Wesson. He's
yeah, Father. I gotta remember that, Father Tony Smith and Wesson. 5.56, I believe, is the game hunter round for big game, and that's what they use. And they use a mixture rifle, doesn't matter. But anyway, that's why there was a delay in that. And I also want to say this. He was seen with a rangefinder. Did you say that?
Yes.
Because I had heard that this morning. So what's a rangefinder? You ever see golfers take out that little square thing and look at see how far the pin is on the golf hole? It tells them it's 117 yards. He was with a range finder earlier in that day. Why would a guy need a range? It wouldn't carry a rifle. He just had that range finder. That should have been suspicion to somebody why he would be walking around with that. And so the thinking is maybe, this is just a thought, this is no guarantee, that maybe he realized it'd be too hard to get up on that roof. So maybe he'd just shoot some people like in an active shooter situation, which is very scary. Now, this is a philosophy that's bouncing around now through my ranks, that maybe he thought it'd be too hard to get to the Trump because he was too low in the ground. So that's why he had his rangefinder. But then then he saw the opportunity that roof was not covered, that he got up on that roof. That's just a guess, just a guess. We'll see what happens.
What about the people who went through security to attend the event? I remember I was in certain situations, and the president was going to be present, and a week or so in advance, I had to send all sorts of documentation in order to get cleared to attend the event.
Were you very close to the president? Because normally that would be the case if you're on the behind him or on a chair table or something with him, close to him.
I could have been. It was like a reception.
There you go. It's a reception, so it's a closed event. Yes. So if it was just 10,000 people in this field, that I think you made the remark, we did have a secure perimeter inside the metal perimeter. They did have to walk through metal detectors, but we don't have as much control outside the perimeter, which is why we have counter snipers. Remember, our counter snipers, they figure out where's the best spot for them to shoot the person on that podium, and then they set up on that position. So they're counter snipers. So that's their philosophy.
So they're looking at sort of like a John Wilkes Booth situation.
Correct. Yeah, they're counter snipers.
So were they behind the podium?
They were up on top behind the podium, in the building behind them, yes.
So they had the line of vision that they could...
And the shooter was hard right to the right of them. So they must have concentrated, and all this should come out in the investigation. And after the FBI and the Secret Service are done with their investigations, I'm positive Congress is going to do an oversight committee, Republicans and Democrats, and find out what happened.
Well.
And one other topic I'd like to touch on, because it is being talked about in the news regularly, Rebecca, if you could roll the video footage from Saturday night with, this is his protection detail Saturday night. You don't have to mute, yeah. And just to take a look at the personnel you see there. Okay, now Rebecca, let's go to his protection detail from Monday night at his RNC convention walkthrough, and just notice the difference in the folks around him. Everyone's taller, everyone is at least his height or taller. Greg, can you speak to us just a little bit about what is needed to protect the president, and are things the way they should be?
Well, obviously they've changed their security here compared to what was at that event in Pennsylvania. You notice that all these guys are taller and bigger compared to some of the agents that were coming up. Maybe if he's 6'3", I think some of those agents might have been 5'5", 5'6". Well, we're supposed to cover completely, and unfortunately his red hat got knocked off, and one of the agents actually bent down and exposed his chest and his head to a possible second shooter. So and our people noticed that right away, right? Because that's how not we're trained. But anyway, I think you're right. They did bring in taller people to provide better protection.
What about the shoes?
He either got knocked out of his shoes or somebody stepped on him. I don't know how they fell off, but he wanted his shoes back. He did say that, yes.
Yeah.
I don't know. President Rice said, let me get my shoes, let me get my shoes. They're trying to get him off that stage. Let me get my shoes. And then, of course, his hat fell off and somebody bent down and picked it up. And but he was kind of resisting them. He was putting up a little bit of a fight, and they're trying to get him off there as quick as possible.
Sure. So we have about a minute left. I want to give you just a second. Thank you so much for joining us. You're a deacon, you're clergy, you're perfect for this panel and for this conversation. So thank you so much for joining us today and
My pleasure.
Giving us insight. And secondly, you're part of the Indian Summer Camp or Kids Cancer Alliance.
Yeah.
And they receive funds from the WHS Crusade for Children. And
Absolutely,
these
you guys.
panelists here help distribute that. You have a book called The Sneaking Deacon.
My proceeds go to Kids Cancer Alliance. Yep, and it can be bought here by Carol Butler, who's a Louisville lady here. She's my editor, and she does the printer. She's my printer, so I appreciate that. Or they can reach out to me on Facebook. I'll be happy to sign a book for them. But I've donated $9,000 to Kids Cancer Alliance from the book. It talks about me being a police officer, Secret Service. I don't badmouth any politicians.
Talks about your coverage of the Pope as well.
That's why I'm wearing a collar. This wasn't my plan. Apparently God had a different plan than I did.
It's a great story. It's in the book. Well, anyway, thanks. Sorry to cut you off. We have just a few seconds left. I wanted to thank our panelists today, Father Tony, Sally, Clay, Rabbi Stan, Greg. Thanks for joining us. As always, you can check this out on YouTube, and we'll follow this story, and we'll continue to stay on top of it. Thanks so much for joining us today, Greg. It's a great conversation.
Appreciate
Have a great week.